So our next guest on The Next Step is Courtney Chennault, a Hammond Scholar who graduated in 2018 and now works at Google. She's currently a marketing program manager. Courtney previously worked as a diversity data analyst. And outside of work, Courtney's interests include travel vlogging and setting and achieving personal goals. And Courtney, welcome to The Next Step back at the OAE. It's nice to have you.
Everyone, yes, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm super excited to be here.
And it's actually the last part of that introduction that I'd like to start with, if we could. I follow you on Instagram, and I always enjoy seeing your stories and your posts and where you are in the world right now and what you're up to and what hikes you're doing. So tell us a little bit about that part of your life, just to kind of get us started.
Yeah, definitely. So I've always loved to travel. And this year, it was actually one of my goals to start a YouTube channel to show off some travel vlogs. And so with my YouTube channel, I also turned my Instagram into a travel page as well. So I've just been traveling as much as I can, given the circumstances. And I'm currently traversing the country on a solo social distance mission. So I'm making YouTube videos about where I am. I'm currently in Houston. So I started in San Francisco and I'm kind of migrating to the east. So I can share my YouTube channel with the audience if anyone is interested in subscribing, and also my Instagram handle.
Sure, that would be great. You can drop that in the chat if you'd like, or you can read it out now, whatever you prefer.
I'm gonna put it in the chat.
And so how much time do you spend in any one spot?
I've been doing about a month. So I spent a month in Las Vegas right after leaving San Francisco, and then just 2 weeks in Phoenix, and now a month in Houston, and possibly a month in New Orleans next. And then I'm also trying not to plan out the whole trip, because that's part of the fun is, deciding kind of on the fly what I want to do next. But that's been my path so far.
This is a pretty epic journey. My now wife, she wasn't my wife at the time, but right after we finished college, we did a cross-country trip. We did, I think it was between 9 and 10,000 miles in 17 days. So it was much more of a sprint than what you're doing, but I really sort of admire the pace at which you can absorb the country.
Yeah, thank you. And I will be back in Miami soon, probably in January. So I'm super excited about that too.
Well, that's good timing, because January is a great time to visit Miami. Yeah. So listen, Courtney, take us back. Tell us a little bit about your background. Where and how did you grow up? And how did you end up at the University of Miami?
Sure. So I'm from a suburb of Detroit, Michigan. And I feel like I knew that I wanted to attend from the moment that I first received a pamphlet from the school my freshman year. And I'm sure that plenty of the attendees today can remember that first pamphlet that they received from the university. But it just stood out from all the other schools that I had seen. And so I was kind of going through high school, keeping in the back of my mind that I wanted to attend Miami. I just didn't really know how to make it happen. But I ended up becoming interested in environmental issues in high school and also marine biology. And so I thought that that's what I wanted to study. And so that was like a perfect excuse to get my parents to let me come down to the campus and talk with some professors about the marine biology program. And I think that's the time when we also learned about the Hammond Scholarship. And so once we were accepted with the scholarship, it was a pretty easy decision to come to the school.
Awesome. That's good to hear. Tell us, what did you study while you were here? And is what you ended up studying what you came in planning to study?
Yeah, so like I said, I thought I wanted to do marine biology. But before even attending the school, I realized that it was just too math intensive. And I'm not a super math and sciencey type of person. So I decided to come in undecided. And I knew that I wanted to study Spanish. I assumed I would just do it as a minor. But then I ended up taking my entire freshman year, just taking courses and realizing that I might want to major in Spanish. And I also realized that I really did enjoy the environmental track that I was on. And so when I looked up the name of that major, it was something called Ecosystem Science and Policy. And so that's what I ended up also majoring in, and I declared the double major at the end of my freshman year.
And how about outside the classroom? What were your main involvements?
Yeah, my freshman year was kind of a mess, to be honest. I feel like I was interested in so many different things and I didn't really know what to do. I was in the marching band for my freshman year, so I played the mellophone. Shout out to anyone who's in the band. But I quickly learned that it was not for me. And so my sophomore year, I had to kind of reset mentally and I applied to student government. And so I was actually one of the first members of Green Committee, which if you're more familiar with ECO, it's the sister agency to ECO. So it's an environmental board of student government. And so I was on Green Committee until graduation. And my sophomore year is also when I started working as a security assistant in the dorms at night. So that was fun. And I did that also through graduation. And then I studied abroad my sophomore year. And when I returned as a junior, I started doing research for the geography department. And then finally, my senior year, I also got another job as a tutor and mentor with the athletic department.
Great, nice, well-rounded experience overall. Tell us a little bit about studying abroad. That's always a great topic of interest for students.
Yeah, definitely. I knew that I wanted to study abroad ever since I first learned about it when I think I was in middle school. And so I was really excited and I was very intentional about going my sophomore year. I felt that it would give me a lot more flexibility in the courses that I could take. And also I thought that I might want to study abroad again later in my career. So it would give me ample time to go back for another semester if that's what I wanted to do. But I studied abroad in Spain because, again, I was majoring in Spanish. And it was just a really great experience. It wasn't anything like I had imagined it would be. It was definitely my toughest academic semester, which is contrary to what everyone always says. But it was really challenging academically. And then also just emotionally, kind of being away from campus was really difficult. But it was a great experience. It's where I met two of my closest friends that I have today. So I highly recommend studying abroad to anyone who's interested. And if you have questions, feel free to ask me, or you can reach out to me later if you want to talk more about studying abroad.
Great, thank you for that, Courtney. Tell us about career. It's nice to hear that you chose your major based on your interests and things, but how did your career ambitions and goals evolve? And we don't even have to talk yet about your current role, but what were you thinking about as an undergrad in terms of what you would do after school?
My career goals, I feel, are very amorphous and just very undefined and very vague. I'm kind of all over the place. But when I was in college, I had done an internship with a local environmental justice nonprofit back in Detroit. And so I was really interested at the time in doing more non-governmental organization type work and nonprofit type work focused on environmental issues. And I also, again, I love to travel. So I thought that I could do something maybe with the Peace Corps and do an environmental project with them or work for a nonprofit abroad, something along those lines. And then my senior year, I also was really interested in doing a Fulbright scholarship. And I was planning to go down to Panama for a few months to teach English and then also do some environmental work on the side. I ended up not getting accepted into that program, but those were kind of the goals that I had and what I thought my career would probably look like.
You ended up going to Panama not too long ago, right?
Yes, I did. I made a vlog about it. So definitely check that out. But it was a great country and I definitely would go back.
Cool. So tell us about Google. How did you get there? And what's it like?
Yeah, so it definitely doesn't really make sense, like how I got there, given my what I studied in school and what my career goals were. I never planned to be working in tech. That wasn't really even on my radar. But I ended up doing a 3-day program with Google when I was a freshman in college. And it's a program that I always recommend college students to look into. And the reason that I even applied to that program in the first place was because I have an older sister, Blair, who's also in the audience today, who did the program. She interned at Google twice, and now she also works there full time. So I had seen her go through that program, and that was my introduction to it. So I did those 3 days as a freshman, and it was really just a meet and greet. You know, here's the Google Cafe. Oh, like, look how awesome we are. We have free food. And then that got me to apply for an internship my junior year. And so when I did the internship, it was 11 weeks out in California, where Google is headquartered. And I ended up choosing HR to be the department where I interned. And that was just through a process of elimination. I didn't want to do sales. I didn't want to do finance. So I just ended up in HR. And so then at the end of that summer is when I got my offer to come back full time. And so that's how I joined the company.
Okay. And so take us through the evolution of your career, because I think congratulations are in order, right? Weren't you recently promoted or had a change of roles? So that's exciting. Uh,
Yeah.
Tell us about, your first role with the organization and your current position.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I joined the company through a rotational program, which was targeted for underrepresented um, new grads right out of college. So I joined a group of 9 other people who had also just graduated. And the purpose of this program was to rotate us through different roles in HR so that we could get a better sense of the type of work and what we might want to do indefinitely. So the first role that I had was as a program manager, and I was working in the hiring space. And so my team answered questions like, how do we get a consistent interviewing process across the entire company? And then my second role was as a diversity data analyst. And so that team was very different, but we were answering questions like, what percentage of our Google employee population identifies as Black versus, biracial versus something else. So that was really an interesting role. And then I just joined a new team about 2 months ago, again as a program manager, but doing marketing and branding. And so it's interesting because I am a marketing program manager, but I'm still in HR. So it's kind of a diverse role, I guess, in that sense.
Okay. I like to make a quick sort of PSA to those students watching. Just a reminder to please use the Q&A feature at the bottom to submit your questions. When Courtney and I are done chatting, we'd like to bring you all in to ask your questions about Courtney's experience at UM and beyond. Courtney, back to you. I know you said your career path is sort of undefined and maybe unclear, which I really like the idea of, sort of letting the journey evolve and seeing what occurs and what things might be on the horizon. But have you thought about your long-term plans or goals or even graduate school or anything like that?
Right. That's a great question and something that I think about all the time, especially as I've continued to pick up new roles basically every year that I've been at Google. And I think that, again, I'm still pretty unclear about what my long-term goals are. And so I actually read a book that I would recommend to everyone if you haven't read already, called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And it's a classic personal finance book, but the author gives really good advice. And he says that someone who's thinking in the short term takes a job for the title or the salary, but someone who is being smart and thinking in the long term takes a job for the skills that they can learn in that role. And so that's kind of what I've been basing my career moves on so far, is what skills do I want to learn and what role will help me learn those skills. And so that's how I chose my current team as marketing and branding. As I said in the beginning of this conversation, I have a YouTube channel, I have my travel Instagram, and I'm trying to learn how to build that into a brand. And so I need to know branding, and then I need to know, how do I market myself? How do I market my brand? So of course I have to learn marketing. And then I want to learn public speaking, and I want to learn storytelling. And so my current role is going to help me get a lot more advanced in those skills. And so that's kind of my mentality when I'm looking for a new role. And if I had to, define a job, or if I had to say a career path, I would say that that would probably lend itself to public relations or speech writing for an executive at the company, something along those lines. But again, right now I'm just kind of focused on what skills do I want to learn.
Okay, very good. So I want to kind of segue away from this conversation and into the student conversation. But before we do that, I'd like to give our students a chance to get to know you a little bit better. So I'll ask you some very quick questions. You can feel free to give quick answers or to explain a little bit if you'd like. Does that sound good?
Yeah, perfect.
All right. So first, what is your favorite movie?
I don't really watch movies that much, so I just picked a genre and I would say comedy.
Okay. It's hard to argue with comedies. How about your favorite cuisine or type of food?
I love seafood, any kind of fish, shellfish, seaweed, anything.
Okay, so you and Shayla won't be going out to dinner anytime soon, but I agree with you there on seafood. It's a great that's a great meal. So, as someone who is so well traveled, what is your favorite trip of all time that you've ever taken?
That's a great question and something that I think about all the time, especially as I've continued to pick up new roles basically every year that I've been at Google. And I think that, again, I'm still pretty unclear about what my long-term goals are. And so I actually read a book that I would recommend to everyone if you haven't read already called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And it's a classic personal finance book, but the author gives really good advice. And he says that someone who's thinking in the short term takes a job for the title or the salary, but someone who is being smart and thinking in the long term takes a job for the skills that they can learn in that role. And so that's kind of what I've been basing my career moves on so far is what skills do I want to learn and what role will help me learn those skills. And so that's how I chose my current team as marketing and branding. As I said in the beginning of this conversation, I have a YouTube channel, I have my travel Instagram, and I'm trying to learn how to build that into a brand. And so I need to know branding, and then I need to know how do I market myself? How do I market my brand? So, of course, I have to learn marketing. And then I want to learn public speaking and I want to learn storytelling. And so my current role is going to help me get a lot more advanced in those skills. And so that's kind of my mentality when I'm looking for a new role. And if I had to, define a job or if I had to say a career path, I would say that that would probably lend itself to public relations or speech writing for an executive at the company, something along those lines. But again, right now I'm just kind of focused on what skills do I want to learn.
Okay, very good. So I want to kind of segue away from this conversation and into the student conversation. But before we do that, I'd like to give our students a chance to get to know you a little bit better. So I'll ask you some very quick questions. You can feel free to give quick answers or to explain a little bit if you'd like. Does that sound good?
Yeah, perfect.
All right. So first, what is your favorite movie?
I don't really watch movies that much, so I just picked a genre and I would say comedy.
Okay. It's hard to argue with comedies. You already gave us a book recommendation, which, if for those of you who didn't notice, I dropped it in the chat in case you'd like to check that out. But do you have a favorite book then instead?
Um, Honestly, I just started reading this year, which I know that sounds crazy, but I was never a big reader. And so I had a list of books that I really wanted to read this year, and Rich Dad, Poor Dad was on there. And I think it just really changed my perspective on a lot of things. So I guess if I had to pick a favorite book right now, it'd be Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Okay. And a year spent traveling and reading sounds hard to beat. How about your favorite cuisine or type of food?
I love seafood, any kind of fish, shellfish, seaweed, anything.
Okay. So you and Shayla won't be going out to dinner anytime soon, but I agree with you there on seafood. It's a great that's a great meal. So, as someone who is so well traveled, what is your favorite trip of all time that you've ever taken?
That's a really hard question, and I have to think about this one. I feel like all of my trips have been memorable just for, different reasons, but I think one of my favorite trips was the one that I took after graduating from UM, and I backpacked in South America for about 4 weeks. And so I flew down, I found a tour company online that was hosting this tour. And so I flew down to Buenos Aires, Argentina. I met up with, 20 strangers, and then we all just started traveling the continent for 3 weeks. And then at the end of that trip, I met up with my mom in Lima, and it was her first time in South America. So it was a really fun thing to get to experience that with her.
That is awesome. When was that?
It was right after I graduated, so the summer of 2018.
Okay, you and we talked about that
We
because I
did.
went to Peru just a couple years before, and it was one of the best trips we'd ever taken.
Yeah, that's right. We did.
Awesome. Okay, so what is your favorite decade for music? 80s, 90s, thousands, 2010s, or something else?
I think the 90s and the 2000s.
There's always that 20-year lag for music, you know? How about a little more broad or personal even? What are you most proud of?
I think that's a good question. I feel like I try to be proud of myself for a lot of different things. I'm very proud that I was invited to come speak today. So thank you so much for the invitation again. And then I also am proud of myself for trying new things and never letting fear get in my way of doing the things that I want to do. So, for example, my trip across the country right now, I had to leave my apartment in San Francisco, and I sold all of my stuff and I just kind of hit the road. And it was really intimidating, but it's something that I've always wanted to do. So I'm just proud of myself for doing that and sticking with the YouTube channel. Yeah, just going after what I want to do.
Great. And is there anything you would do differently if you had the chance?
Um, I feel like, and maybe everyone feels this way, that I wish I had started a YouTube channel when I was 10, and then I would have 1 million subscribers by now and I could just be, a social media influencer. But obviously that didn't happen. So yeah, I don't know that I have a good answer to this. I guess just always wishing that I had been maybe more confident to say yes to more opportunities earlier on, and just realizing that, if I make one mistake, it's not the end of the world or the end of my career, and it's okay to say yes to things that you've never done before.
Nice. Well, speaking of the community, I know we have some Hammonds and other students in the group in the audience here. So I'd like to invite them to ask their questions. Let's bring Shayla on. And while she's getting set up, I just one more shout out to the audience to please go ahead and use the Q&A at the bottom. Courtney's a great resource. She's had a lot of great experiences, and this is a great opportunity to connect with her. So Shayla, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah. Michaela has the first question. Michaela, go ahead and unmute yourself and introduce yourself and ask your question.
Hi, I'm Michaela. I'm a sophomore here and I'm actually majoring in marketing. So like hearing from you is really interesting. I was just wondering, since you said you applied to Google internship, is that the Google Bold program by chance? Okay. Like what sort of recommendations would you give to applicants to that and applicants to the Bold Immersion, which is I think the short program you did?
Yeah, definitely. So yes, those are the exact two programs that I did. I think the first thing is just being on top of the application timeline. I feel like the applications for both of those programs open in the fall. And so it's well in advance of when they actually take place in the summer. So just knowing when the application is open, and applying to it on time. And then I think, I don't pick the participants, or I don't pick who gets the internship or anything. So I don't know exactly what they're looking for. But I think one thing that helps people stand out is when they can highlight something that they're passionate about in their applications. And so for me, again, I didn't have any background in HR or anything related to what I was applying for at Google. But I just talked about what I did in student government on the environmental board. I talked about going to environmental protests and just showing kind of a passion that I'm really interested in something. And when I'm interested in something, I just go after it and I learn about it, and I'm a quick learner, and just really selling yourself by getting yourself excited about something that you're not really excited about. I think that's a really good thing to put on your application.
Awesome, thank you.
Thanks so much, Michaela, for your question. I actually have a question. You mentioned the rotational program, like a career development program. I've heard a lot of good things from those types of programs. Which one did you get selected to be in? And what were some of the things that you got to learn and do?
Yeah, so there's a few of these new grad rotational programs. I think one is for finance at Google, I'm talking about specifically. One is for finance, one is for marketing. I was in the HR rotational program. And it's really great because they know that you're fresh out of college, so you're brand new to, professional life. So they give you a ton of resources. They bring in a lot of speakers to help you with your resume and to help you, interview for new jobs. And it feels like an extension of college, I would say. And yeah, it's just a really supportive. Everyone knows that you are switching roles and you're trying new things, and they want you to be trying new things. And it was just a supportive community for sure. I would definitely recommend rotational programs.
Great, thank you so much.
Hey, Courtney, I had a quick question, if I'm thinking back or putting myself in my advising role and working with current college students, can you think back for a moment to your transition to college? How was that first year for you? Do you remember any stressors or hardships or highlights?
Yes, I was very stressed out, I feel like, because number one, well, this tool that I learned about later on, which hopefully everyone knows about, the Rate My Professor tool, was honestly a lifesaver. And I was able to, once I learned how to use that tool, I was able to pick specific courses with specific teachers that I really wanted to meet and learn from. So that helped me a lot. But I think like the social pressure that I was feeling as a freshman was more overwhelming than the academic piece of it. I just felt like everyone was doing a million different things. And here I was in marching band. I was exhausted and hot and sweaty all the time. And I didn't have any time to do anything else. And I just felt like, oh my gosh, like I'm so behind. So it was definitely a hard transition to make. But I remember going home for Thanksgiving break that year and just being able to reset and kind of talk to my parents and hear their advice, which was, you don't have to run around and do a million different things, just try something, and what you're interested in, like you'll stick with that, and that's enough. You don't feel like you have to constantly be building your resume with a bunch of random clubs and organizations. So it was a hard transition, but I think I made the most of it, and I definitely was able to turn it around and have a phenomenal experience coming back for my second semester.
I think it's good for students to hear that because you had a very successful career here. And sometimes, like you said, there's a certain pressure. Maybe it comes from a few different directions, but you feel like you're not doing enough, or you feel like you're the only one who's stressed out, or the only one who may be having a difficult time connecting to the institution or to a friend group or anything like that. There's just so many doubts and questions. I think it's nice to hear that really everyone goes through some form of that, for sure. I wanted to ask a little bit about, I guess, what advice would you have for students? I'm looking at the students in the audience, and I know we have some very ambitious and very talented students. Thinking they might be curious about things like interviewing skills, for example. And you have a bit of a background in HR now. What advice would you have for students who maybe have an interview coming up?
That's a great question. Advice for interviews. I think number one, doing your research is very important. So you want to do your research on the company that you are interviewing with. And if you can find the interviewer's information, look them up and see, where did they go to college? Where are they from? Can you say like, oh yes, I also went to that high school? And then you have that connection with the interviewer. Those are like some of the personal things that I like to do. But then I think more broadly, just knowing the story that you want to tell. And I talked earlier about trying to build my storytelling abilities. So this is something that I'm still working on. But you just have to make your journey and your interest in the role make sense to the person that's interviewing you. So you have to think about where you've been and why you want this role. And then because you're in college and because you don't have years of experience, you talk mostly about, or you want to leave the interviewer feeling like you have so much potential and like that you're going to take this role into a great direction or that you're going to do great things. And it's less about proving like, oh, I have a 10-year long career and like look at how successful I was. It's more about like telling that story and kind of painting that picture of where you've been, where you are, and all the things that you hope and plan to do.
That's great advice. Really good tips on connecting with interviewers and people that you would interact with. If we could again look backwards, think about connections with faculty when you were in undergrad. What was your experience like trying to connect with faculty?
Yes, that was another point of stress for me in the beginning because everyone kept talking about you have to have a mentor and you have to have, like, if you aren't best friends with your professor, you'll never get an internship and you won't get a job. And I felt like I just wasn't clicking with my professors. And I realized that when you're a freshman and a sophomore, you're taking more general level courses and beginner level courses. And so, number one, your teachers have way more students because everyone is taking the same intro to bio. Like there's hundreds of people in their class. So it's harder to make that personal connection. And so I found that it was so much easier and it happened way more naturally when I was a junior and a senior and I was taking these specialized courses with only 5 other people in the class. And then of course, it's way easier to make that personal connection. And so that's how I started doing research with the geography department. Is I took a geography class with a professor that was brand new to the university. And so I think that was one reason why there were only a couple of us in the class because people were afraid that no one knew who this person was. But I took the class and he was a great professor. He asked me to start doing research with him. And so again, I did that for about 2 years and I still keep in touch with him. He was going to help me get an internship one summer. And yeah, he's a great connection that I have. And then same with, I would say, the other professors that I keep in touch with. I met them when I was a junior or a senior because I was in these really small niche courses.
That's great. Courtney, it might be because it's after 5 on a Thursday, which we all know is sort of the end of the college students' week in some ways. Or that I think we're in like the 12th week of classes, maybe 11th, but we have a quiet bunch of students today. However, Shayla and I have a lot of questions for you, and Shayla wanted to hop back in and ask you a couple things before we let you go.
Okay.
Yeah, if you could just talk about, typically working at Google, you think, oh, I have to be an engineer, I have to work in tech, I have to know how to do marketing and things like this. Can you talk about, since you had such a different path to get to Google, just talk a little bit about the stigma of you don't have to be in tech to work at Google, and maybe some of your coworkers, just other people that are, did other majors or studied other things that are now where they're at.
Yeah, definitely. So of course, I am not in tech. My sister is not in tech. And I think it's even harder for students who are not in tech to even find out about these opportunities. And I know that schools or technology companies will go to schools and really, really look for engineering students, and that's who they spend a lot of their attention on. So it definitely feels like if you're studying something business related, like you can just kind of get lost in the weeds. But so I think the first step is just finding these opportunities, which again, I'm happy to share the internship and the 3-day program that I did. I can share that out after. But so finding the opportunities is really big. And then I think, being on the business side of the company, I don't even really interact with engineers that much. And so this might sound silly, but sometimes I forget that a huge percent of the company is engineering. Like that's not who I interact with. None of my friends at Facebook or Twitter, like they're all also in HR or marketing or finance.
Mm-hmm.
So Yeah, I wouldn't say that it's been a challenge being at the company. I would say the biggest challenge was just finding the business role at a big tech company.
Gotcha. I had one more question, but I lost it. But the other one that I had was, can you just walk us through what a day to day is like for you at Google? Like what your role is, what a week is like, what type of projects you work on, things like that.
Definitely. So I can talk more about when the offices were open because I think that's more fun.
Yes. That actually was my other question. I don't, sorry to interrupt, but like also with everything that's going on COVID related, how has that changed the field or your role as well?
Yeah, so I feel like my role and responsibilities have not really been affected by COVID. But before COVID, when we were in the offices, I would get to work and I would eat breakfast. And for those of you who don't know, Google serves breakfast, lunch, and sometimes dinner. So I would get there like just before breakfast would end. I would have a really delicious vegan meal prepared by expert chefs. And then I would open up my laptop and a lot of email checking goes on. In my current role, it's a lot of meetings. It's a lot of coordination between, well, I guess I should explain what my team does now. So as I said, we're branding and marketing, but because we're in HR, our focus is branding the HR department and presenting it to the rest of Google so that engineers know what it means to be like what HR even is, like, you know, that we're the people who give them the benefits that they need and we're the people who give them vacation days and kind of all those things. So that's what my team does, is market HR to the rest of the company. And so it feels right now like it's a lot of coordination between an external vendor that we're working with and our partner teams. Google's very collaborative, so we're always working with a bunch of different teams. So there's a lot of meetings that I do. We run a lot of surveys, I would say. Google's really big on collecting data about experience. So a lot of survey conduction, a lot of emails, which I feel like is just kind of typical for any office job. And I know that doesn't sound very interesting, and maybe it's just because I'm only 2 months into my new role, but that's what I'm doing now, leading some meetings and just a lot of planning and strategic work. So back to when I was in the office, of course, I would be going to lunch after a while. Then maybe I'd go play volleyball on the volleyball courts with my friends before our 3 o'clock meeting. And then, yeah, just a lot of perks and a lot of fun things to do on campus. But it is definitely a work hard, play hard type of environment.
Mm-hmm. Good.
Courtney, on behalf of the OAE and the University of Miami, we really appreciate you coming back and spending time with us. And personally speaking, it's always a joy to chat with you. I admire what you're doing and how you're living your life, and I wish you well. And could we throw up the you for old time's sake?
Yes. And also, I just wanted to say before we jump off, if anyone would like to reach out to me on LinkedIn, again, YouTube, Instagram, please feel free. And I also love reviewing resumes. So if you need help with your resume, I'm more than happy to look over it too.
Well, that is a very generous offer. We really appreciate that. I'm sure, and I hope that our students will take you up on that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And Michaela, thank you for asking your question. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Courtney. You take good care of yourself. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay, bye.